The arrays we have learned so far are all one-dimension arrays, one-dimensional, which means it has only one subscript, one dimension. There's also something called new dimensional array. A new dimensional array is an array of arrays. It can be thought of having rows and columns. Each row is an array, and the two-dimensional array has a set of array of arrays. So declaring a two-dimensional array requires two sets of brackets, like here. So first thing means the smaller size of array, the individual array inside this array of arrays. And the first one indicate how many number of rows, how many arrays you have in your array. Let me try to repeat this. The first one is the number of rows, or how many arrays do you have inside this array. The second one is the number of columns. How many columns, how many maximum number of elements you have in each array inside your two-dimensional array. The two sets of brackets in the data type indicates that the scores variable will reference a two-dimensional array. Notice that each size declarator is enclosed its own set of brackets. So when processing the data, each element has two subscripts. One is for its row and another for its column. So let's draw pictures again. Oops, not this one, but let's draw so this is one array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 elements. Now, what if I copy it? Then it becomes 5 arrays. Now let's do a array of array, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. So here we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's call it array of arrays. ARYS. Right. So when you think about this array of arrays, which apparently that's what we mean, it contains the address of an array, address of this array, address of this array, and then address of this array additional. This array of arrays is an array. I should use a better name. Sorry about that. Let me delete this name and change it to something like my 2D array. So my 2D array is an array of arrays. Each element inside my 2D array is a referencing of a variable pointing to another array. So here, my 2D array 0 contains the referencing address to an array. And this array from 0 to 7 is what is is an object by itself, which is pointed by my 2D arrays. So when you try to reference any of this, for example, this one, this is 0, 1, 2, 3. You will write my 2D array 0. That means this object, right? So far, the whole part, my 2D array subscript 0, pointing to this array. Then when you write 3, you are pointing to the particular element of this array, which gives you the reference to the, let's say it's an integer element. Similarly, if I write my 2D array 4, I'm pointing to this. So far, this my 2D array 4 points to this array, the last array we have here. And if I write 7, then I'm pointing to the 7th element of this 2D array 4 array. So I hope this makes sense, easier to understand. And let's go back to PowerPoint slides. That's the address pointing to the whole array object. It's easier to write it this way than drawing picture like mine. So normally we will draw things like this. And you should keep in mind this row 0, row 1, row 2 are actually array objects of the 2D array, which in itself, each one points to one 1D array. And that's how we write each code, each element, how we access each element. Score 0, 1, score 1, 1, score 2, 1. When you need to specifically access one element, you use two subscripts. First pointing to the row, second pointing to the column, to specify which element you want to access, and you operate on the element just as if you would access any other variable. And program process two-dimensional arrays can do so with nested loops. And usually we use a row, column, or I, J, and going through each and every row and the column. So here you are looping through 0 to 3 to 2. And here you are looping through columns 0 to 3. And each row, each column, in the intersection of each row and each column is an element, and that's how you enter, how you manipulate on that particular element. And you want to print out the scores array, you do the same thing, you print out. And when you try to initialize, and remember, you are initializing one array at a time. You look at this initialization list, you are initializing one array at a time. So this is the row 1, which is the array. Row 2 is the array. Row 3 is the array. You are defining this as 3 arrays. Each has 3 elements. You are declaring an array with 3 rows and 3 columns. And then the numbers variable holds the address of 2D. The same way as you would 1 array, 2 array. Look here, 1 array, 2 array, 3 array. Oops. 3 arrays. Just following exactly how it's matching. And then the two-dimensional array are arrays of one-dimensional arrays, right? So the length field of the array gives the number of rows in the array. Now you look at here. When I count the, note this one. Let me do using a red one. This row count by itself is an array. So when I calculate the length of my 2D array, it's actually counting here. My 2D array dot length is 5, which is whatever is here. But my 2D array length 0 dot length is the length of this array. Let me use a different color. It is the length of this one. So bring this up back. The length field of the array gives the number of rows in the array. Each row have a length constant telling how many columns is in that row. each row can have a different number of columns. So you can see here, number.row, as we said, this numbers.row is each element, right? And this row can have its own length. And you can see here, we can actually have different length for different rows, which means here, I don't necessarily need to have everything as a 7. I can even have 8, 2 of them as 8, and maybe one with 8 and 9. In this case, Java Virtual Machine will compile the array to the maximum number of the columns that would allow the whole array to be fit properly. So this here, number of columns is row. This is how you define number of columns. And number of rows. This is how you define arrays, two-dimensional arrays in Java.